Okay, today we're going to start by the Mishnah and Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, 78a. I think Hashem that you're learning Torah every day.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ramesha. In the schus of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. The Mishnah starts off, Hamiluim. Yeah. The Miluim is the inauguration, which happened in the days of Moshe. But there, Aaron and his sons, which is actually this week's Parsha, Aaron and his sons had to bring sacrifices as part of their inauguration when they were becoming kainim. So they had a sacrifice. It says, "Hayiboyin kematzah shabbatoida chalis rikikin urevicha." The toida had 40 loaves. 30 were matzah and 10 were chametz. The miluim has the 30 that are matzah. It doesn't have the 10 that are chametz. What were the 30 that were matzah? Was the chalis, rikikin, and revicha. Revicha was the one that was boiled, right? Like a bagel, boiled like a bagel. It has 3 out of the 4 of the taida, right? Exactly like the taida. Yeah, that's what we're saying. Like the taida, but it's only the 3, not the 4. Nezira says sabashte yades kematzah shel taida vein baravucha. The loaves of bread that come along with the Shalmi Nazir, 2 of them are like the matzah of the taida, but it doesn't have the revucha, it doesn't have the boiled one. Nimtza asara kaben Yerushalmis. Now, we said that there were 15 kav for the 3 matzah. It says we have 30 kav altogether. 15 were for the chametz, 15 were for the matzah. 15 for the matzah, if there were 3 types, so each one was 5 kav, right? So now that there's only 2 types for the Shalmi Nazir, then there's only going to be 10 and not 15, right? Shehein Shisha Esrenes V'Aidyan, which turns out to be 6 Isaran plus a bit. Now that bit is going to be a 6, which means like this. We really had an entire Ephah for all 3 matzahs, all 3 types of matzah for the type. An entire Ephah means that it has 10 tenths of an Ephah. A tenth is called an Isaran. Isaran Ephah is a tenth. So it's 10 tenths. So if there's 3 types, so each type had 3 Isaran plus a third, which means 2 types would be 6 Isaran and a 6th, right? Correct? 6 is 7. Okay. So now, when we're dealing with only 2, so we're going to have Shisha Srenis V'Aidyan plus a bit. The Aidyan means the plus a bit extra. So it's a 6th. Minani Mili, the Gemara asks, how do we know that the chalis of the miluim were the 3 types of the taida? Amrav Chist, Amrav Chama Bar Guria, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Misala matzah shelafnei Hashem lekach chalis matzah achas v'chalas lechem Hashem and achas rek kachad." It says in the pasuk, it's this week's parsha, that from the basket of the matzahs that's in front of Hashem, you should take 1 loaf of matzah, 1 loaf of oil, and 1 wafer. Gemara says, Bishlaima chales schales. When it says the loaf, okay, I know what the loaf is. That's the loaf of the taida. Rakik is the rakik. The wafer, I know what the wafer is. What's the loaf of oil? My Neil. Lavler vucha must be that it's boiled in oil. And that's what we mean. That's the 3rd one. It's boiled in oil. Just 1 second. Let me just see this. Is that what? Hello, Ramesh, you hear me? Still on? Sometimes it goes off if the call comes through.
Yes, I can. I just turned on the slide. Yeah.
Okay. Maskefler Ravavya. Okay, so we asked, but Shema and my Niu, Lavler Vucha must be the boiled one. Maskefler Ravavya, Ravavya. Question: Ima Anta the Mishcha. Now, this I think what this means is maybe this is like a cake of oil, be like maybe like congealed oil, but this is one option. Or maybe it's just a dough that's fried in oil, but it's not boiled. How do you know that it's boiled in oil? Like the revucha, like we're saying. Deeper boiled is fried would just be. Anyway. So when it's fried. Ella Kedadarsh of Nachman bar Rav Chisda Mishmei Rav Tavla. Rather, we have another source, like Rav Nachman bar Chisda said in the name of Rav Tavla. It says, Zek Karban Aaron of Anav Shekrivel Hashem B'Yem Himashachayse. This is the sacrifice of Aaron and his sons that they bring to Hashem on the day that they're anointed. It says, actually, I didn't translate that right. On the day that he's anointed. It's supposed to be the translation. Yem Himashachayse, on the day that he's anointed. The Gemara asks, what does it have to do with his sons if he's anointed? Excuse me. Excuse me. Ela makish pinuchai liimashchai. Rather, what we're doing here is we're doing a comparison, just like the chinuch, which is the inauguration of a regular kayan. That's coming to do a comparison with us to the anointing of Aaron. The anointing of Aaron meant that he had to bring a chavite kain gadol, right? And the chinuchai is a kain hedit, which is also basically a chavite. Mahi mashchai, just like when a kain gadol is anointed revucha, the chavite had to be right, boiled. So just like the chavite kain gadol is boiled in oil. Also, on the day that kain hedit is inaugurated, also he has it boiled. That's what it means. Chalas lechem shemen achas. So that means that it's boiled. Okay, excellent. Amar Rav Chisda. Kain gadol hamiskarev la'avayda tzarech shtei isreines shnei isreines eifa. The kain gadol that when he is coming to do the avayda for the first time, so he has to bring 2 isarin, which is isreines eifa, 2/10 of an eifa. Achas limashchai, achas lechinuchai. 2 things are happening here. First of all, it's his first time doing the service of the kain gadol. Second of all, he's being appointed as a kain gadol. So when he's being appointed, he has to bring this chavitim, and then when he's being inaugurated, he also has to bring it. Mar Barbashi Amar Shalish, he has to bring 3 times, three of them. It says v'lei pligi. There's really no machlekes. When Rav Chisda said that you bring 2, the avayda kishu kain hedyet, that's because he already did the service as a kain hedyet. Now he's becoming kain gadol, so he has to bring 2. One for becoming a kain gadol, one for doing the service of a kain gadol for the first time. But Mar Baravashi that says you bring 3, the lo yavad avayda kishu kain hedyet. He wasn't even a kain hedyet yet. So when he's doing the service as a kain gadol, he's also doing the service as a kain hedyet for the first time. Is now a kain gadol, but included in the kain gadol is also a kain hedyet. That's just plus, right? So he's a kain hedyet plus a kain gadol plus it's the being anointed. So he does that for he brings 3. Naziris Heisabash the Yadis Kamatza Shabbatayda. We said that the Shalmi Nazir, the peace offering of the Nazir, had 2 types of matzah similar to the Taida, except that you didn't have the one that was boiled. Tanar Rabbanan was taught in the Brisa. It says shlamav by the korban tamid, but not the korban tamid, by the korban taida, the Thanksgiving offering. It says shlamav. The rabbis shall minazer la'aseres kavan levi Hashem. Coming to include, because there's a yud shlamav, which is a plural shlamav, his peace offerings. What does it mean? Peace offerings, the plural. It's coming to tell me that there's another offering which is done exactly the same like this, at least partially the same, which is the Shalmi Nazir. So we say, L'Rabbi Shalmi Nazir L'Aseres Kabin Yishamas Levi Hashem. We were learning that the Korban Taida had 15 kabin of matzah, and the Shalmi Nazir is going to have 10 of those kabin as matzah, because it's only going to have 2 of the types, not 3 of the types of matzah. So, but in the oil over here is also the same, which is a revius of oil. Maybe it should be exactly the same. Maybe it should be all 3 types, which mean 15 kavin of these matzah loaves. Talmud Laimar matzais, says matzais. What do you see from that? My Talmudah. How does matzais exclude the 3rd type? It's only 2 and not 3. Amar of Papa says, turns out that by the 3rd type of loaf, which the korban taida brought, it doesn't say the word matzah there, by the boiled one. It just says, what was the pasuk that we had? We had Lachem Shemen. No, that was by the inauguration part. Anyway, it just says revucha. The Beis Rabbi Shmuel Tana. How do we know the Beis Rabbi Shmuel taught that they say it says matzes klal chalas rikikin prat klal uprat ein b'chlal amashe b'prat chalas rikikin in midachin alei. They have another source. It says in the pasuk matzes. Matzes is a very inclusive term. It could mean any type of matzes. So then the pasuk says chalas and rikikin, which is loaves and wafers. You have loaves and wafers. That's a specific. So we have a general and then a specific. What's included in the general is only the details of the specific, which means you're only going to have the chalis and the rikikin, but you're not going to have the revucha because it limited it to the specific. We're on top of Ayin Ches, Amad Beis, brand new Mishnah. Someone checked the taida properly. Problem was, his bread wasn't in the right place. The bread, which is supposed to be consecrated along with the shechita. See it? Ayin Ches Amid Beis.
Oh.
We did the Mishnah on Ayin Simon. The bread is supposed to be inside the azara together with him. It turns out over here it wasn't. So we don't know exactly what the chayma is. We'll see in the Gemara, but it's outside the wall. Which wall we'll see in a moment. So it says like kadosh alechem. Bread isn't consecrated. You were by the siyum?
Yeah.
Oh.
For the one we did downstairs.
Downstairs, yeah. And it's finished. So okay. Okay. So like kadosh alechem, the bread doesn't become consecrated because it's not in the right place. Shachta actually karma panah betanar. Let's say shechted it, but the bread wasn't finished baking yet. Karma panah means it didn't have a crust. The bread wasn't done. You shechted. The bread was supposed to be baked. Then you shechted. Then everything becomes consecrated with the shechita. But the bread didn't have a crust yet. I feel karma kul chutz mi'echad mehem like and even if it's all crusted except from one of them, all the bread doesn't become consecrated. That all have been ready to be. The Michael Ben Drusai basic cooking of when it comes to baking is karma panah, is the crust. Right? Michael Tzlachaim the Gemara. We didn't say we had the vessel consecrated. Here we said the shechita consecrated. There is other cases with the vessel consecrated. So, Ma'ichatz l'chayma. What does it mean that it's outside the wall? Which wall? This is outside the base Pagi, which is the wall of Yerushalayim. It's outside Yerushalayim. No, it's not outside Yerushalayim. It's outside the Azara. Big difference. Where the bread was. If it's in Yerushalayim, according to Rabbi Yechanan, it would still be Kaddish. Rishlakish says it's outside the Chemetz Azara Binan al B'samach. It says al lechem, whatever the pasuk was, al chalis lechem chametz Yaakov karbani, on the loaves of chametz he brings his sacrifice. What does al mean on? It means next to. So next to means close by. Rabbi Yechanan, which means that it's in the Azara. Rabbi Yechanan mechutz chemetz beis pagi, avol mechutz Azara kaddish. But if it's just outside the Azara, it'll still be holy. Leibin al b'samach. Al b'samach, when it says next to it doesn't need to be close by. Next to it's good enough. It's in the same country. Suburbs.
Just go through Al.
Yeah, we've had Al.
Just recently.
Yeah.
There was Cordell.
Oh yeah, it doesn't mean on the river. It meant next to the river. But they already, Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish already argued about this one time before. Why do they have to argue about it again? They're like new arguments. Huh? To prepare for Pesach. They didn't watch the news?
They didn't watch it. They doing it. They said you shouldn't argue about it.
There was a Talmudic scholar. It was like not from the Shrum community, but it was a scholar. Anyway, they said the students asked him, "Who's greater, you or the Rishonim?" They said the Rishonim. They didn't have television. That was his. It's the way he categorized it. Okay. Okay. They already argued about this. It says, what does it say? Ditran, very appropriate for today. Shechedes Pesach al Hachametz. Carbon Pesach, supposed to be shechted this afternoon. It has to be after the chametz is already destroyed. You can't own any chametz. If you do have, not only that, but if anyone in your group has chametz, it becomes a violation. The whole group has to be clean from chametz. So if someone shechts a carbon Pesach, and there's chametz still in his house, he violates a negative prohibition. So it's sishchad al chametz. Don't shech the carbon Pesach with chametz. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, af tamid, also af tamid. Also, the carbon tamid, which is brought this afternoon, which is before the right, the carbon tamid is brought before the carbon Pesach. So then,
Like the
Tamid ben
they brought it early that day.
They brought it early, right, to fit it all in. So that also needed to be without any dam zivchi over there. He holds is talking about my carbon tamid as well. So carbon tamid, right, the afternoon sacrifice. Right. I guess so. Or at least the sheichet. At least the sheichet has to be. Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says, Laila menachai vad shiei, Oila sheichet, Oila zayrik, Oila echad menei chabura, Imei ba'azara. Going back on the carbon Pesach. It says that whoever it is over here, either the sheichet or the zayrik, or anyone from that group that it was being offered for, if they have to have their chametz together with them in the azara in their pocket, in their pocket book. I don't think they're allowed to go in with a bag, right? So they would have to have it in their pocket, like they do at the Rebbe's when they go to the tishin or stuff. You get a roll, you sneak it, push it in your pocket, and you rush. Get squished somewhere. So they have the chametz. They have the chametz in this pocket. Oh, okay. So you have it in his pocket. Yeah. By the way, you have to check your pockets. That's another thing you have to check. You have to empty out the pocket. For chametz, people forget. Depending on the chametz, you empty out. Or last night, every Friday. This is a different type of checking. That's
You check, you check. If you don't check, you don't check.
so.
Checks in the mail.
Rabbi Yochanan Amar Alfa Pishain Imai Ba'azara. Says it doesn't have to be with him in the Azara. It says anywhere. Okay. So what's the machlekes over here? If al means with you, or if al means anywhere. Right? Al chametz means near chametz. According to Rabbi Yochanan, even if it's back home, it's still a violation. According to Rish Lakish, it has to be with. Just like where does the breads of the carbon toida need to be? Do they need to be with you in the Azara? They need to be anywhere in Yerushalayim. Same machlekes. The Gemara says stricha. No, it's necessary to have both machlekes. Now, what happened over here? Surprising. I've seen this Gemara, but I thought the pshat in this Gemara was. I mean, it's quoted in other places. I thought it had to do with Asra Suffolk. Can you? Over here it says like right? Oh no! Oh, this is just Iver Beles essay. The other Gemara was talking about like. There's machlekes if you get malchus. If you shecht, now how do you get malchus? Someone has to come along and warn you. It says you're not allowed to do this. If you do continue doing this, you still have your chametz. Then so there was machlekes if he has to have it with him, or if it get the malchus, or if it's back home. And what does that have to do with Asra Safik? Can the person or the witnesses that are warning, can they know that you still have it? Because they don't know if it's back at home. They don't know. So it's a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish of Asra Safek. They warn you, and there's a doubt. It's Shmei Asra. If that's considered a real warning, that's a big discussion. Which I think is machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish. So I think this Gemara exists in another format.
The guy shechting has to deny that.
Yeah, so that's a question. He has to say Afal Pikain. I'm doing it anyway. And when he does that, now, there was all. You're right.
Unless his wife made me know that knowledge.
Well, there was another problem over there I saw in the Psichon. He says, but there's another issue that maybe it was Mevatler. That you can never know. Yeah, and then he went to, that's what he answered. He said, Afal Pikim tells us that he wasn't Mevatler. He also says an interesting thing, that who told us that he has, let's say one person tells us that he has chametz, and two people warn him. He says, so you basically have two witnesses, but it's all based on one witness. And that would work as well. You don't need the two witnesses for everything. The two witnesses just need to warn him, and the one witness can testify that, because you can establish that it exists based on one witness, and then you have the two witnesses warning him. They sell the chametz. There's a Gemara about selling chametz if you're on a boat. Selling chametz was a later institution when the Jews owned breweries. So it came about. They owned breweries and they had to sell. It was impossible to have that business if they didn't sell. It takes a few years to brewing. Okay. So the Gemara now says tzricha. It's necessary to have both machlekes. The if it was only spoken about by the one about shechting, become Rabbi Yochanan the kol hechad the isay be surakai. Over there, it would say that wherever it is, it's still a prohibition. That's where Rabbi Yochanan says avalin in mikdash, but mikdash alechem. But if you want to consecrate the bread, Kaddish, Avroi like Kaddish. Maybe he would agree with Rish Lakish that it has to be inside. It won't become consecrated if it's not inside. Over there, when it comes to shechting and the chametz, it still exists. So we would say that that's a prohibition. But how does the bread get consecrated? Maybe it needs to be in Nazar. In other words, maybe Rabbi Yochanan would agree with Rish Lakish by the other case, by our case, where it needs to be in Nazar. Then it says, it goes the opposite. B'yitmer baha, and if it would only say regarding the bread, the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, if it becomes kaddish, Bakam Rish Lakish. Over there, Rish Lakish says that it needs to be with him in the Azar. Aval Bahach, when it comes to shechting, with the shechting Karm Pesach, Imam Meidelei, the Rabbi Yochanan, maybe he would agree to Rabbi Yochanan that it would be a prohibition even if it's back at home. So tzricha, I need both of them. Tani Kava say the Rabbi Yochanan. Brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan exactly the way that he learned it. It says, "Hashecher es hatayda lifnim, v'lachma chutz lechem es pagi leikadosh alechem." Says if he shechs the carbon taida properly, but his bread is outside Yerushalayim, then the bread doesn't become consecrated. According to Rish Lakish, it should have said the bread is outside the Azara. Raya to Rabbi Yochanan. This Brisa supports Rabbi Yochanan. Okay. We're talking about here. No, there are two cases here. One was chametz, and one was he's shechting a carbon taida any day of the year, not Pesach. And he needs to have loaves of bread together with him in the Azara. Now it turns out that 10 of those were chametz, but it wasn't a Pesach issue. No, that was the. No, that was referring to the minchas nesachim. Whenever someone brings a sacrifice, together with that sacrifice comes along the libations, wine and oil and the flour. Those could be brought later. If you didn't have it that day, it says bring it 10 days later. If you shechted it and the loaves were not crusted, they didn't have a crust yet. We say that that's not eligible to become consecrated, so they don't become consecrated too early. How do we know that they have to be after they need a crust? The Tanur Rabban was taught in the Brisa. On the loaves of chametz, he brings his sacrifice on the offering. Teaches us that the bread only becomes consecrated if it has a crust, because it says lechem chametz. Yaakov karbani al zevach. The end of the pasuk says that he should bring his sacrifice on the offering. This tells us that the sacrifice here that we're talking about is the bread becomes consecrated with the slaughtering of the sacrifice. Zevach taidas, the taidas, the offering of the taida. It needs to be shechted for the right intention. If it's shechted for the wrong intention, not for the taida, that's for a different sacrifice, then the bread doesn't become consecrated either. Tanur Rabbanan, listen to this. It comes Pesach night, tonight, Yaitzin b'matzah, even if it's not fully baked, you yaitz the matzah. Matzah suya bilfas. Well, let's say it was baked in a pot, in a pan. What's the cakes that are baked in a pan? These
pancakes.
Not pancakes. It's come with with the hole in the middle.
Bund cake.
What is it?
Bund.
Bund, yeah. They made the matzah in some sort of pan, instead of on a flat on a griddle thing. You made it in a pan with a container.
You also learned that before when we talked about if it came over the rim,
If it was consecrated, if it goes over the part that's sticking out. My matzah, what does it mean? Not fully cooked. Baked. For Shmuel, it says Shmuel kol sheparsa vein chutin nimshachim mimena. It still needs to be baked enough that when you pull it apart, you don't see strings, the doughy strings that are stretching from one piece to the other. Then it would be eligible. Now the cheese would make the strings. This is where it doesn't have the strings, right? Amarava, the same applies to the loaves of the taida, that if it's baked in a way where you already don't have the strings, then it's considered step one. Now the Gemara says pshita, hacha lechem ksiv, hacha lechem ksiv. Over there it says lechem, over here it says lechem. So of course it's the same. Why does Shmuel have to say this? Mal de tema echad amarachmana shleitel paras. Baha commander prisadamya. For some reason, it's not fully baked. We consider it like it's crumbly, like it's just pieces. I guess it gets more solid as it bakes more, and when it falls apart easier before it's fully baked. So I could have thought that maybe it's not considered one. It's not considered whole. Mashmalan, that it's considered whole as long as the strings don't get What's it called? What is it called? Crumb cookies? Like crumb cake.
Or
Yeah.
crummy.
Uh-huh. We have to be careful tomorrow. We can't say cookies. We have to, right? We can't talk about chametz. We have to be careful on Pesach. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Can you say, I'm not thinking about cooking? I'm not thinking about pizza.
You know, people were mocked not even to mention the word chametz on Pesach. Even to say the word. Itmar. This is an interesting Gemara. Taida sheshachta al shmeinim chalas. We had this before. In passing, we had this that if someone instead of designating 40 loaves for the taida, he designates 80. Now, there's two possibilities. One possibility is just in case. He doesn't want. Just in case he has extra. He's the type of guy he does extra. Other possibility is it's not a just in case. He actually wants to have 80 because he wants to have a larger party for the taida. So 80, he really means 80. There's one possibility that the 80 was because in case I lose the first ones, I'll have these as backup, like achrayas for to guarantee. So Chizkiya said when he does this, Chizkiya says Kachu Arbar Mitech Shmeinim. Chizkiya says, okay, 40 out of the 80 worked. Now Kaddish. Rebbeinu says it's all nothing. It's all nothing. It all doesn't work. Amar Reb Zera comes along and he explains. Zera moved to Eretz Yisrael. He says, if he says that 40 out of the 80 should be consecrated, so then everyone would agree that works. If he says, Al yakdeshu arbaim elim ken yakdeshu shmeinim like kachru. If he says 40 should not become consecrated unless all 80 become consecrated, so then everyone's going to agree that it doesn't work. The machlekes is if he doesn't say anything. He just says 40 should be consecrated. So I just need to see where they got that from. Maybe if he didn't say 40, maybe he just said it should be consecrated. What do they say? What do they say when it says stam? In this case, he merely brought the extra 40 loaves as possible replacement. No. 1 second. He could give a stomach. Specified nothing. Nothing. He didn't say anything about the 40 loaves, about the extra 40. He doesn't say anything. So let's take a look. Mar Savar, Chizki would hold Achrayas Kamachaven. When he said he's consecrating and there's an extra 40, so we know that that the extra 40 is just in case there's backup, in case there's something wrong with the first one. Guarantee. It's a guarantee as a yeah. Oh yeah. You have to get wife sends you to the store. You don't know what you want, and before cell phones, you have to come back with every possible thing, just because you don't know. Says, I didn't mean the white onion. I meant the red onions. The thing that this, I never get this type. I said, okay, so I got it just in case. Got it covered. Okay. Marsavar carbon gadol kamachaven, and Rabbi Yechanan says no. He's bringing 80. They meant because of big carbon, which is a problem. He's messing it up by bringing extra. Abaya says the Kuli Alma. Okay, now there's two versions to this Gemara, which would change the whole shot. Let's see how to do this. That's I am. everyone holds, let's say, lachrayas kamachavan. Everyone holds that he's having the right intention. That it's just to have the guarantee. The klisharis mikachin shalei midas kameflagi. Like this over here is will a klisharis do what it's supposed to do, even if your intention is not perfect. Now, that should really go the other way. If everyone held that it was for a carbon gadol, this is an easier shot. Everyone holds that stam, you really mean, if you're doing it stam without specifying, you really mean to have a big carbon. However, what does the klisharis do without you saying anything? So Abaya says that Mar Savar Chizki would hold klisharis mekadshin shlemidas, that the klisharis is going to do the right thing. It's going to consecrate it, only the required amount. And Rabbi Yechanan Savar Mar Savar klisharis ein mekadshin shlemidas, that it's not going to do the right thing. It's not going to change from what your intention is. Okay. Rav Papa says everyone agrees that the klisharis is going to do the right thing. Over here, the problem is the knife. And therefore, it's going to consecrate 40, which is the right amount. The knife is not going to do that, and so therefore you're going to be left with 80. And it's not going to fix the problem. The klisharis, if it would be a klisharis, it would actually fix the problem. But over here, it's just a knife. Ikeda Amri, Rav Papa Amar, the Kol Yam klisharis ein mekadshin ela midas, that the klisharis only works if you have the intention. V'acha b'sakin k'meflagi, Mar Savar sakin alima miklisharis. Chizki holds a sakin is even better than a klisharis. A regular service vessel wouldn't do it, but a sakin would. Davagav d'lesli toich mekadsha. Even though it doesn't have a receptacle, but nevertheless it still consecrates. So this works even stronger. Mar Savar sakin le'alima miklisharis. And Rabbi Yechanan holds it's not any better than a klisharis. It's and since a klisharis won't fix the problem, so the knife also won't fix the problem. Okay. Shachta chutz l'zmana. If you shech the carbon taida, but you mess up on the intention, you have intention to eat it after the allotted time. Now, a carbon taida only has one day and that night. When you shechted it, you had intention to eat it tomorrow. Or chusam kaima, or out of the allotted place. It says kaddish alechem. You messed up the carbon. The carbon becomes pigel. No, it means chusam in general over here means almanas. It means that it becomes pigel. Kaddish alechem, the bread becomes consecrated. Now, I guess that means that it's also pigel. Yeah, it's pigel as well. It's consecrated, but it's pigel. You can't eat it. Shachta v'nimtza streifa. Let's see you shech the animal. This would be a classic question. You shech the animal, and now you have these breads here, and it turns out when you open up the animal, you see that it was a treifa. The lungs were not good. Something was wrong. Like kaddish alechem, and then the bread doesn't become consecrated because it was never eligible in the first place. Shachta v'nimtza. You didn't know that, but nevertheless, shachta v'nimtza balas mum. You shech it, and you find out that it's a balmum. Sounds like a treifa, same problem, except that a balmum doesn't mean that the animal wasn't kosher. Balmum means that it wasn't acceptable to be a sacrifice. It's different. Could still be kosher. Rabbi Lezer Merkiddish, Rabbi Lezer says the bread becomes consecrated. Chamram like Kiddush, Chum say that then it doesn't. In our Gemara, we're going to quote Rabbi, the Chacham as Rabbi Yeshua. I'm not sure if you can actually eat the animal. I don't think so. I think it was consecrated already, so it was shechted as if it's a korban. I don't know if you can bring it.
Once you made it to hektish,
Right. You could have redeemed it beforehand if you would have known. You redeem a balmum, but you didn't do that.
So maybe they could have him to eat the meat, but it wouldn't be perfect.
Sounds more like a puzzle carbon. I don't know. Shachta Shalei Lashma. Let's say you had the wrong intention for the carbon. You thought it was you didn't think it was a carbon tidy. You thought it was something else. The same thing would apply to the riyam of the miluim, or the same thing would apply to other things where they had loaves together with it. But the nazir also had loaves. Or if the sheep, the lambs of Shavuos that also have loaves with it. That were slaughtered for the wrong intention. Like Kiddush Alechem, the bread doesn't become consecrated. Who's the author of our Mishnah that says that Chutz Luzmana, Chutz Kaima? We say it's Reb Meir. It's Reb Meir. The Tanya was starting to write Zaklal. Kol Shepsulai Kaidem Ashchita. If it was ineligible before the shchita, like it was a treifa or something, like Kiddush Alechem, the bread is not consecrated. Pisulai Achar Shchita, but if it became puzzle after the shchita or at the shchita, then Kiddush Alechem does become consecrated. So Shata Chutz Luzmana Chutz Kaima Kiddush Alechem. If it was just the wrong intention, which that's getting ruined, invalidated at the shchita, so then the bread still becomes consecrated. Shachtim nimtzas treifa like Kiddush Alechem, but if it was a treifa, then the bread doesn't become consecrated because that was a problem before the shchita. Shachtim nimtzas balas mum. We're continuing in the brisa. Brisa says that if you shechted it and it turns out that it had a blemish, so it's machlekes Rebbe Lezer and Rabbi Shua. Bayasu was a machlekes Rebbe Lezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Shua would take the place of the Chacham. Rebbe Lezer, Aimer Kiddush. Rebbe Lezer says the bread becomes consecrated. Rabbi Shua, Aimer like Kiddush. Rabbi Shua says that the bread isn't consecrated. That's what Reb Meir holds. Reb Meir holds that this is a machlekes. Amar Rabbi Yehuda argues with Reb Meir. He says, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua agree that if it was a treifa, it doesn't become consecrated. Balmum Chutz Lizmanei is yes, and Balmum is not. Al manechliku al chustam kaimai. Rabbi Yehuda says the machlekes was not about the balmum. That's what Reb Meir held the machlekes Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua was. Rabbi Elazar holds that it become consecrated, and Rabbi Shua holds that it's not. Rabbi Yehuda says the machlekes was about chutzlam kaimai. You had intention out of the allotted place, not out of the allotted time. Out of the allotted time, it's consecrated. Take a look at they spell out their argument. Very interesting.
Wait, why isn't that big?
Pigel would be chutz lizmanai. Out of the out of the allotted time. Out of the allotted time, it's yes consecrated. It's consecrated, but it's pigel.
Oh, so
it's holy, but you can't eat it, and if you do, it's a violation. Question is if it even becomes holy, or if you can just say, well, it didn't work, so I'll take it back home, I'll use it for another one, or whatever. So, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, if it's chutz lizmanei, becomes consecrated, becomes pasul. Chutzim kaimai, pasul. Before we get to this, chutz lizmanei and chutzim kaimai, both of them invalidate a sacrifice. Chutz lizmanei is much more serious. It's pigel. Chutzim kaimai is not as serious, but nevertheless, it's all pasul. Ma chutz lizmanei kaddish. So the same thing should apply if you have intention for the sacrifice to consecrate the bread. And what happened? And you have the intention for the wrong time to eat it at the wrong time. What happens? The bread becomes kaddish. The same thing should apply for chutzim kaimah. What's the difference? Chutzim kaimah should be exactly the same. It's a good logic. Rabbi Shua says, touch them back. Chutzim kaimah pasal, a balmum pasal. Since both of those are pasal, a balmum, or if you have intention, chutzim kaimah. Ma balmum like kaddish. Just like by a balmum, it doesn't become consecrated. Also, chutzim kaimah should become consecrated. Rabbi Elazar responds back. Usually, you don't get these type of conversations in the Mishnah. The Brisa elaborates a little bit more on the back and forth, and you get this. You get this in the Brisas more. The Mishnah condenses it down to just 2 words. The Brisas could elaborate. So Rabbi Elazar says back, "I need to misiyu chutz lizmanei. I compared it to chutz lizmanei. What are we dealing with? Chutzim kaimai, out of the allotted time. I compared it to out of the allotted. I'm sorry. I compared it it's really, we're talking about a case of out of the allotted place. I compared out of the allotted place to out of the allotted time. And you're comparing it to a balmum. Let's take a look. What do you think it's more similar to? I'll prove it to you. Let's analyze exactly what our machlekes is, and then we'll see who's correct. So Hischel Rabbi Eliezer Laden. Rabbi Eliezer began. Danim psul machshava. Both of these are invalidations that come because of thought. Bein danim psul machshava psul guf. Why should I compare it to an invalidation of the body that it has a balmum? Good point. Hischel Rabbi Shua Laden. Rabbi Shua begins. Danim psul shem bekaris psul shem bekaris. I'd like to compare it to something that doesn't have karis. You're comparing it to something. That's pigel. You're comparing it to something that has karas. Much more serious. One second. It's similar to Shalei Lashmai. Shepsul Machshava Vein Bekaris. That also is a Rabbi Shua was comparing it to Rabbi Shua was comparing it to a Balmum. And Rabbi Eliezer was comparing it to Chutz Lizmanai. Rabbi Eliezer was saying that it was going to be Kadosh, but Rabbi Shua was saying it's not Kadosh. He says if you want to compare it to something that's a psul machshava, I have another machshava that I could compare it to, and that would be chutz shlei l'shmai. If I have the wrong intention for a different sacrifice, it also won't be kaddish. Shasik Rabbi Eliezer agrees. Now Hillel just pointed out that that really what we're discussing here is when did it become invalid? Was it by the shechita or before the shechita? Yeah, so the main point seems to be missing. That's a good question. Okay, let's take a look. Rab Meir, Maishna Shachta v'nimtz streifa davi psul kaidem shchita. Maishna Shachta v'nimtz balmum b'lev psul kaidem shchita. Gemara asked the question. Says why? According to Rab Meir, what's the difference if it was a treifa that the psul came beforehand? Balmum also the psul came beforehand. Gemara says bedukin shaba'ayin. The psul that we have was a specific type of psul. The balmum over here that we're dealing with was a slit on the eye. And it's according to Rabbi Akiva, the Amar, im alu la yerdu. Rabbi Akiva holds that a mum like this, that goes on the mizbeach, it doesn't come off the mizbeach. Once it goes up, it doesn't come down. So therefore it's kosher b'di'evet. Saying it's kosher b'di'evet, so that's why the balmum would actually be, the bread will become kaddish. Rabbi Yeshua, what will Rabbi Yeshua say to this? He holds that the bread doesn't become kaddish. This is in Rabbi Meir's opinion. There's a machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua in Rabbi Meir's opinion. If it's a balmum, if it has a blemish, if the bread becomes kaddish, Rabbi Yeshua would respond, yeah, Rabbi Kiva actually says that it does go on the altar, and it doesn't come down. If it had a mum because of the slit in the eye, which is a minor mum, so it's going to go on if it goes on the altar, it doesn't come off the altar, so which means it's kosher b'di'evet. However, at least it stays on the altar. However, that doesn't mean that the bread becomes consecrated. Rabbi Yeshua is arguing on that detail, that yeah, it stays on the altar, but the bread doesn't become Itmar. Following statement. Chatas sheshachta chutz lizmana.
Can we stop?
Yeah. I guess we'll leave it at Itmar. Finish. It's just there's a Mishnah coming up. Right. Right.
I know.
Right. That's what we're saying.
I'll start to work my
I don't want my girlfriend. I don't want my girlfriend.
What's
The nice. Yeah. Go for sure. Walk. Good morning. Good guy, right, man.
Often. Goes along with it. Now, you know.
And we're saying, but if the offering was invalid in any sort of way, then it won't consecrate the bread.
But it's not so unlikely to stay up.
This morning?
No, but we're saying
You said you looked your
just
count.
the fact that we leave it up there, that doesn't mean that it's really valid. It's that we just
It's about how
okay.
you get to the front
Let's
end.
leave it up there. I'm stopping at Itmar, Moshe. So everyone to daven.
I know,
Okay.
I'm aware.
Good day.